Hello and welcome to the top 10 essential classical music albums on vinyl part 2. Hopefully you've seen part 1 where I've listed a top 10 essential classical music album list specifically on vinyl, which is a recommendation of my personal collection with regard to the quality of sound, quality recording, the artists, the works itself, compositions, essential composers, essential works that you must have in your vinyl collection. I believe that there's so many works that needs to be in a collection, so it's so difficult to pick out 10 best ones. So this is my second list of top 10 essential albums on vinyl. So let's go on with the listing. The first listing here, number 1 is Brandenburg Concertos, number 4, 5 and 6. I wish I had all the concertos in one album, so it would probably be a double LP, but unfortunately I don't. Here I've got 4, 5 and 6, and these are the last 3. Now the Brandenburg Concertos are very nice to listen to. It's a bit lighter, more spirited basically, and it's sort of for an occasion, so it features different instrumentations, and I think that's what's interesting about the Brandenburg Concertos, is that they feature different soloists and different instruments as well. So it's very interesting. I love listening to the Brandenburg Concertos, and I think it's important to have them in your collection. So for instance, number 4 is originally written for recorders, 2 recorders and solo violin. In this case we have 2 flute soloists playing the recorded parts and the solo violin. Now these days you find that very often that it's played by 2 flutes. It sounds very good with 2 flutes actually. So that's number 4. Number 5 is the famous harpsichord concerto. Harpsichord or cembalo. Harpsichord or cembalo probably is traditionally more of an accompaniment instrument for Baroque ensembles. In this case, concerto number 5 features the cembalo. It's a very beautiful work actually, and it's a long cadenza which the cembalo plays by itself, or the instrument is completely alone. So it's a wonderful work really, and I think for any cembalo or harpsichord player it's very nice to play. Then number 6 is an interesting one. It only features the lower strings, 2 violas, 3 cellos and a contrabass. So, and of course cembalo accompaniments. So what's interesting about this work, it's very rich and full, and therefore that's the orchestration. It's obviously lower strings. It's very nice to listen to. It really rounds all the Brandenburg Concertos off very nicely. I love this album and very much highly recommend it. Once again, very nice program notes about the Brandenburg Concertos. It's historically interesting as well, so I'd highly recommend this one. Next up is George Bizet. 3 compositions which are, I think, very well known compositions by George Bizet. Written for orchestra, Berlin Philharmonic under Herbert von Karajan again. There's so many recordings I've got of Herbert von Karajan, Berlin Phil. I think it's difficult not to have that combination, because of the era of the vinyl records when they were recorded and produced, 60s, 70s, 80s, 50s. So that's when Von Karajan was around. So anyway, they're all very good quality recordings, so that's why I specifically love them. But L'Elysian Suite number 1 and 2 are very, very well-known works composed by Bizet. And then the Carmen Suite number 1, which is taken from the opera and put into a concert suite. So it's a wonderful suite, the Carmen Suite, and it's highly energetic. So it's the prelude, the entr'acte 2, entr'acte 3, and entr'acte 4 out of the opera. So very, very nice. The Carmen Suite there, Suite number 1. Then L'Elysian Suite number 1 and 2. L'Elysian suites were sort of composed in a Baroque style, French Baroque style. So very, very interesting works and quite folkish in a way. So L'Elysian Suite number 1 features an alto saxophone solo, which is beautiful, beautiful music. I specifically love the third movement, the Adagietto, which is only strings. It's beautiful, really wonderful. And then the Carillon, which is sort of a bell-like motive played, first being introduced by the horns and then taken through the whole orchestra. Very nice work. L'Elysian Suite number 1. L'Elysian Suite number 2 actually uses the same themes of L'Elysian 1 and written a little bit differently, but that's a quality recording, and these compositions are very nice compositions. So wonderful album this. Next up is Benjamin Britten, and I love the artwork here as well. Benjamin Britten has a very famous piece, Young Person's Guide to the Orchestra, which he composed, and the main theme was composed by Henry Purcell. So he took the main theme, which is from a Westminster suite, and he composed it. He used that theme and composed something totally new for the Young Person's Guide to the Orchestra. It's basically like Peter and the Wolf. It introduces the instruments of the orchestra with narration, and each section has a feature, basically a little composition that you can hear each instrument, each section. So if you're really trying to collect vinyl records in the beginning, you don't have many. I think trying to find the Young Person's Guide to the Orchestra is really very insightful and very educational, actually. And it finishes off with a fantastic fugue. It's a wonderful composition. And then Serenade Opus 31. That's probably the least known of the two, but it's a very mysterious piece of music. Quite dark as well sometimes, but it's a lovely work, and you have to really dig into the work and to appreciate it, but it's beautiful. Tenor soloists, and horn, French horn and strings. The legendary Barry Tuckwell is a horn soloist. He unfortunately died beginning of this year, 2020, and then Peter Pierce is the tenor soloist. This recording, I'm not sure what the date is of this recording, but anyway, 1964. So once again, very nice program note about both works. And finally, a little bit of chamber music. You don't always find lots of chamber music on on vinyl recordings, especially if you shop second-hand recordings. You mostly find symphonic works or concerti, but Dvorak has got some wonderful, wonderful chamber music. Two of my favorite works, actually, in the entire chamber music repertoire: String Serenade and the Wind Serenade. The String Serenade, basically a string orchestra. The Wind Serenade is for 13 instruments, a combination of wind instruments, one cello and one bass. So the instrumentation is very, very nice of the wind serenade. So the soloists are the English Chamber Orchestra Wind Ensemble and the English Chamber Orchestra Strings, under the direction of Sir Charles Mackerras. And for instance, the Wind Serenade, 2 oboes, 2 clarinets, 2 bassoons, a contrabassoon, 3 horns, cello and bass. It's one of my favorites. It's a delightful piece of music, actually. The Wind Serenade the composition was inspired by Mozart's Wind Serenade, his Grand Partita Wind Serenade, which is a fantastic work itself as well. So Dvorak simply had written a wonderful piece of music there. And then the String Serenade is beautiful as well. 5 movements for the String Serenade, 4 movements for the Wind Serenade. I highly recommend this, especially if you like chamber music. It's a proper record, this. Next up is some George Gershwin, American composer. I think these 3 works for me are probably his most essential, most famous ones. Rhapsody in Blue for piano and orchestra, Piano Concerto in F, and then the American in Paris. There are some other works by Gershwin as well, like Bowie and Bess, for instance. But this is a complete album because of these 3 works. It's very nice. And then Andrei Previn, who is the pianist and conductor. So this is a very nice recording, really. The Rhapsody in Blue, of course, is quite jazzy, very bluesy, and it's like a sort of a very much jazz influenced composition. The Concerto in F also, you can hear a lot of jazz elements, especially in the second movement, with that phenomenal blues being played by the trumpet. Just feels like you are in a bar in the 1920s. Wonderful composition. And then finally the American in Paris, which imitates a lot of the busy streets of Paris, car horns and noises from the street, from the markets. So it's an interesting composition, very nice orchestration, the American in Paris. So yeah, and again for me, a very nice program note written of these 3 works. 1971 recording. If you're looking for if you're trying out symphonic repertoire, if you're trying out symphonies, you don't know where to start, you probably have to start with Haydn, because Haydn was the father of the symphony. And Haydn's symphonies are very expensive, very simple, but difficult as well. Difficult in the sense of for the orchestra. Some of them are quite difficult. So These two symphonies on this album were both composed when he was in London. They are part of the 12 London symphonies. Number 100 and 104 is nicknamed the Londoner. So the London symphonies are very good, very nice. Obviously, the Surprise Symphony is also part of the 12 London symphonies. So this is a wonderful recording. The new Philharmonia Orchestra under Otto Klemperer, and I specifically love this version, the interpretation by the orchestra and Otto Klemperer here. It's very nice quality recording, sounds very good on a proper setup, and it's delightful music, very nice to listen to. Haydn symphonies, and a very nice program note in English, and then one in German as well. So beautiful works these, and wonderful recording. Okay, number 7 is the Mozart Requiem. I think Mozart Requiem is a work that you must listen to if you want to expand your repertoire a little bit. If you've listened to some Mozart compositions already, some of his famous ones, like Symphony Number 40 or the Serenade with Eine kleine Nachtmusik, or Piano Concerto Number 21, or the Magic Flute opera, then the Requiem. I think it's a good composition to listen to when you've already discovered Mozart, because this is one of Mozart's final works, and he died whilst composing this composition. So there's a very nice story behind the Requiem, and I'm not going to go into that really, but he died whilst composing, and rumor has it that his student Süssmayr completed the Requiem in honor of Mozart. And Mozart, the story is that Mozart almost sort of composed the Requiem for his own death, because he was becoming ill and he was under a lot of time constraints composing this Requiem, because he was doing other compositions as well. So he had a sort of a time limit on the Requiem. So it's a fascinating work, a fascinating story. It defines Mozart as a composer. It's just an unbelievable work, the Requiem. And it's a Requiem Mass. Its text is in Latin, with choir and orchestra and soloists. It's a beautiful work, really. It's a must-have. So the new Philharmonia Orchestra under Rafael de Burgos. It's a wonderful work and quality recording, actually. Next up is Russian composer Rimsky-Korsakov. Rimsky-Korsakov was a notable orchestrator. Composer, of course, wonderful composer, but his orchestrational technique was something else, really exceptional. And I think it's best described in some of his orchestral works, which one of them is Scheherazade. Scheherazade is the story of Sinbad. So it's a whole journey on the sea, and here is wonderful artwork again. That's very nice about vinyl, is that you can really appreciate a composition by just the artwork and the physicality of having something in your hands. The Royal Philharmonic Orchestra under Rudolf Kemp. So it's a wonderful work, and the orchestration is fantastic. It's dramatic. It's mysterious. It's so many things at once, and it really tells a story. You can really imagine the story when you listen to the music. There's a very nice program note about this work specifically. So, and you should have that when you listen to this, because you need to have the story behind it. There's also obviously lovely solo violin playing in this, which is the concertmaster of the orchestra. So this is Alan Loveday, soloist. The Sea and Sinbad ship, Tale of the Calendar Prince, the Young Prince and the Young Princesses, Festival of Baghdad, the sea, the ship goes to pieces on a rock surmounted by a bronze warrior, is the conclusion. So it basically is the tale of Sinbad, Scheherazade. Wonderful composition. Then the final two albums. Number 9 is London Symphony Orchestra under Kenneth Elvin, and this is Tchaikovsky's iconic 1812 Overture. Also 2 other overtures features on this, Capriccio Italien and the March Slav. Why I chose this recording is because it's wonderful artwork to begin with. Number 2 is the 1812 recording has real cannons. It's composition that it's in the score. Is that real cannons should be fired in a specific spot in the score. So it's extremely effective. Usually when orchestras perform this live, they don't use the cannons, they just use a massive bass drum or 2 massive bass drums basically. But this recording has real cannons in this. So on vinyl it sounds spectacular. It sounds wonderful, really, really awesome. So it's a different experience really when you listen to on vinyl compared to the digital format or CD. So for me this is a must-have. If you find a recording of 1812 with real cannons, you must have that. So basically you can see that there was an army basically part of this recording to fire the cannons. So wonderful recording and wonderful album this. So number 10 is Tchaikovsky's iconic Piano Concerto number 1. The soloists Sviatoslav Richter, he is one of the pianists, I think, of his generation. He is an outstanding pianist, really, and Herbert Karajan, iconic conductor with the Vienna Symphony Orchestra. So he is a Ukrainian soloist, Richter, and his interpretation of Piano Concerto number 1 is very, very good. I really love this recording, and it's a fascinating work, the Piano Concerto number 1. Deutsche Grammophon label once more. So this recording was made or was recorded. Doesn't say here unfortunately, but it's probably towards the 60s or 70s. But anyway, it's a wonderful composition. Piano Concerto number 1, one of the iconic concertos. So much happening in the concerto itself. Lots of changes of melodies, lots of themes, and the conclusion of the concerto is massive. It's a wonderful work, and I specifically love this recording. I've got 4 different versions of this. This is my favorite one, this version. So yeah, if you get this one, it's definitely worth listening to. So that concludes my list, top 10 essential classical music recordings on vinyl, part 2. Thank you very much for watching.